1 hour ago, Britain witnessed the moment that could redefine the future of the monarchy. Prince William didn't just speak, he detonated a political bomb so powerful that Downing Street is scrambling to contain the fallout. What started as a quiet royal appearance has turned into an all-out national scandal, and insiders are saying this is the first time in modern history that a royal has humiliated a sitting prime minister so publicly and so deliberately. Every network, every newsroom, every corner of Westminster is buzzing with the same question. Did Prince William just declare open war on Keir Starmer? According to multiple royal sources, the explosion began earlier this morning at a Veterans Remembrance event in Nottingham, a gathering that was supposed to be calm, ceremonial and apolitical. But Prince William wasn't reading from the same script as the establishment. His tone, his expression, his words, all of it carried a quiet fury that no one saw coming. Without naming names, he ripped into what he called leaders who make promises they never intend to keep, and a government that rewards foreign arrivals while neglecting those who fought for the flag. The crowd went dead silent, veterans stood frozen, reporters gasped, and every political aide in the room knew immediately who those lines were aimed at. Within minutes, Keir Starmer's office went into meltdown, phones ringing off the hook, aides running between offices, and one insider describing the mood inside number 10 as total panic. Why? Because the country's most popular royal had just accused the government of betraying its own people, live on camera and in front of the very heroes Starmer claims to support. The Prime Minister was blindsided, furious and humiliated, and instead of staying silent, which would have been the smart move, Starmer did exactly what his advisors begged him not to do. He hit back. Just after 11 a.m, the Prime Minister stood outside Downing Street and addressed reporters with the stiffness of a man trying to hide rage. His words were sharp, defensive and deeply personal. He declared that Britain is not ruled by princes or privilege, and that political priorities are set by elected officials, not inherited titles. The tone was unmistakable, a public slap at Prince William, the future king. You could almost hear the collective gasp across the country. Commentators couldn't believe what they were hearing. The Prime Minister had just picked a fight with the royal family, and the reaction, instant chaos. Social media exploded within seconds. The hashtag #WilliamFife, shot to #1 worldwide before Starmer even returned inside. Clips of William's speech flooded TikTok and X within an hour. Every major outlet was running headlines like Prince William breaks silence and future king challenges Starmer. Palace insiders reportedly huddled behind closed doors, unsure whether to issue a clarification or stand their ground. But then came the twist that nobody expected. The palace didn't walk it back. In fact, they doubled down. A royal spokesperson released a short but devastating statement. The Prince of Wales spoke with honesty about the challenges faced by Britain's veterans and families. His commitment to service and truth is unwavering. No apology, no retreat. A clear message. William stands by his words. And that one paragraph hit harder than any political press release ever could. It framed William as the voice of the people and painted Keir Starmer as the heartless bureaucrat silencing a prince for defending his nation's heroes. By noon, the story had completely spiralled out of the government's control. Pollsters were already reporting a sudden drop in Starmer's approval rating. Cabinet ministers started whispering behind closed doors, worried that their leader had just walked straight into political suicide. One senior advisor reportedly told the BBC off record, "You never ever go after a royal. You just don't. Especially not William." And yet that's exactly what Starmer had done. Meanwhile, eyewitnesses from the event revealed more stunning details. Before delivering his fiery speech, William appeared tense, pacing back and forth backstage, glancing repeatedly at his prepared notes. Some staff believed he almost pulled the remarks until Princess Catherine gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. She was seen whispering something to him moments before he stepped up to the podium. What did she say? Nobody knows for sure, but insiders claim her words were, "Do what's right, not what's safe." If that's true, it means the royal family knew exactly what was about to unfold, and they allowed it. And that raises a far bigger, more dangerous question. Was this really an emotional outburst, or was it a calculated royal strike planned weeks in advance to expose Starmer's hypocrisy? Because if Prince William's speech was strategic, if the palace intentionally set this in motion, then Britain isn't just witnessing a feud, it's watching the beginning of a constitutional earthquake. So what happens now that a future king has publicly humiliated the Prime Minister in front of the world and refuses to take it back? Has the royal family just crossed a line that can never be undone? Or has Keir Starmer just signed the death warrant of his own government? As the dust settled from Prince William's explosive remarks, Westminster was no longer whispering, it was roaring. The government machine, so used to controlling narratives, suddenly looked powerless. For the first time in years, the Prime Minister's office wasn't dictating the headlines, but the palace was. News anchors couldn't keep up. Commentators were calling it the Royal Rebellion. Former ministers described it as the moment the monarchy reminded Britain who really holds moral power. And deep inside Downing Street, panic turned to desperation. Keir Starmer's aides scrambled to prepare a damage control plan, but every strategy fell apart before it even began. Because how do you spin something like this? How do you fight back against the future King of England without looking like the villain? Meanwhile, outside the political bubble, the public had already chosen sides. Across pubs, offices and online forums, the sentiment was almost identical. Good for William. For many Britons, it wasn't just a royal statement, it was a release. Years of frustration with a government that felt detached, elitist and robotic had finally found a voice. And it came not from a politician, but from a prince. That was the part that terrified Starmer's team the most. When William spoke, people listened. When Starmer responded, they rolled their eyes. The balance of public trust had shifted overnight. And yet, behind palace walls, not everything was calm. Senior courtiers were divided. Some feared William had gone too far, warning that open criticism of government policy could reignite Republican sentiment. Others, however, believed this was long overdue, that the royal family could no longer sit silently while Britain drifted into moral and social decay. One insider, speaking under strict anonymity, claimed that King Charles himself had been briefed about William's planned speech days earlier. The king knew, the source said flatly. He didn't stop it, and that says everything. That revelation sent shockwaves through Whitehall. If true, it meant this wasn't a spontaneous emotional moment. It was coordinated, a subtle but deliberate act of defiance from the monarchy against the political establishment. Journalists immediately began connecting dots, the timing, the location, the topic. The Veterans event wasn't random, but it was symbolic. It represented service, loyalty, sacrifice, everything the public feels politicians have abandoned. It was the perfect stage for a royal reckoning, and the British media, they smelled blood. By the afternoon, tabloids were running double-page spreads with headlines like William the Warrior and The People's Prince Strikes Back. Even normally neutral outlets were calling Starmer's response tone-deaf and politically suicidal. A YouGov Snap poll showed 68% of respondents agreeing with William's remarks, while only 21% sided with the Prime Minister. Those numbers weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. Starmer's team understood exactly what that meant. If this narrative continued, it could destroy him before the next election. But Starmer, known for his stubborn streak, refused to back down. Instead, he doubled his attacks, accusing the royal household of interfering in government affairs. That statement was the final straw. Within hours, several senior MPs, including members of his own party, publicly distanced themselves, warning that the Prime Minister was showing dangerous arrogance. Political commentators called it career suicide on live television. Behind the scenes, calls were being made to Buckingham Palace pleading for a neutralising statement. Yet the palace remained silent. Deliberately silent. Every minute that silence stretched on, the message grew louder. The monarchy wasn't retreating. At the same time, foreign leaders began reacting cautiously. International media outlets in the US and Canada and Australia all ran the same line. Britain's royals break political neutrality. The story had gone global, but what most people didn't realise was that this wasn't the first sign of tension between Starmer and the palace. Sources close to the royal household began leaking small but telling details, disagreements over military funding, royal budgets, and even digital ID laws that William reportedly opposed. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. This was a confrontation years in the making. By the evening, Buckingham Palace's inner circle convened an emergency meeting. The King, the Prince of Wales, and senior advisors discussed one question that would define the next chapter of Britain's history. Should the monarchy issue a statement to calm the storm or allow Starmer to keep self-destructing? The debate was fierce, emotional, and strategic. One aide reportedly argued that silence is power, and right now the public trusts us more than Parliament. The King, according to sources, listened quietly, then uttered 6 words that froze the room. Let the people see the truth. Those 6 words, if accurate, reveal more than any headline ever could. Because if the palace has decided to let this play out, if they're deliberately watching Starmer sink deeper, then this isn't just a feud, it's a calculated power shift. The monarchy isn't just defending its image anymore, it's reclaiming its voice. But what happens when that voice gets louder? What happens when the next royal statement makes it impossible for the government to recover? Is Britain standing on the edge of reform or rebellion? By dawn the next morning, the United Kingdom felt like a nation holding its breath. Newspaper front pages screamed with headlines about the royal rebellion, William's warning to Westminster, and the Crown strikes back. The air around Westminster was thick with unease, the kind that seeps into every corridor and every conversation. For the first time in decades, the political establishment wasn't sure who really held the upper hand, the elected government or the heir to the throne. Reporters camped outside Buckingham Palace, cameras pointed toward the gates, waiting for even the slightest flicker of royal movement. But inside, sources say the mood was calm, deliberate, almost serene. The palace wasn't reacting, it was observing. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, was reportedly on the brink of losing control. Insiders from his own party began leaking messages showing internal divisions, with ministers accusing him of dragging Labour into a war it could never win. One senior MP caught on a hot mic muttered, "You don't pick a fight with Windsor and walk away clean." The public mood was shifting faster than any political strategist could measure. Every poll, every talk show, every social feed painted the same picture. William was the moral compass Britain had been missing, and whether or not he intended it, he had become the voice of ordinary Britons who felt ignored, overtaxed and betrayed. By mid-morning, a shocking development broke across every major network. A confidential memo from inside the Ministry of Defence was leaked, one that revealed serious discrepancies in the government's handling of veteran support funds. Billions in promised aid had been quietly rerouted to other projects. With minimal oversight, the memo was dated weeks before William's speech. Suddenly, everything made sense. His words about forgotten soldiers weren't random. They were targeted. It wasn't just passion, it was precision. William had known, the palace had known, and they had chosen the perfect stage to expose it. The revelation detonated across Westminster like a second bomb. Starmer's credibility was shredded. Opposition MPs called for an immediate parliamentary inquiry. Some within his own party demanded he apologise publicly to the royal family. But Starmer, trapped between ego and survival, refused to yield. In an emergency press conference, he accused certain royal figures of weaponising sentiment to influence politics. It was the statement that sealed his fate. The moment those words left his mouth, 1,000 years of British tradition seemed to fracture in an instant. The monarchy had been publicly accused of political manipulation, and yet it wasn't the royals who looked manipulative. It was the Prime Minister. Across the nation, public anger erupted. Outside Downing Street, crowds gathered carrying signs that read "Stand with William," "Protect the Crown," and "The People's Prince." The protests grew larger by the hour. In Manchester, veterans marched wearing their medals, chanting, "He spoke for us." The symbolism was devastating. The government that once claimed to serve the people was now seen as standing against them, while the monarchy, once accused of being distant and ceremonial, had become the beating heart of national identity. Commentators on live television openly wondered whether this was the moment Britain's unwritten constitution began to rewrite itself. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the strategy continued unfolding with surgical precision. The Royal Communications Office, known for its cautious diplomacy, began selectively releasing snippets of behind-the-scenes footage. William speaking privately with veterans, shaking hands, listening intently, no speeches, no statements, just powerful imagery. Every clip went viral within minutes. The message was clear. While politicians argued the future king was with the people. By evening, several foreign dignitaries, including leaders from Canada and Australia, issued statements praising William's moral leadership. Diplomatically worded, yes, but unmistakably symbolic. The world was taking sides. As the chaos deepened, another twist emerged. Reports that the palace had quietly reached out to senior members of parliament behind the scenes. Not to interfere, but to stabilise, to calm markets, to prevent panic. It was subtle, responsible, and it made the royals look like the adults in the room while the government spiralled into pettiness. Financial analysts noted a sharp drop in the pound early that morning, followed by a quick recovery once word spread that the palace was monitoring developments closely. Imagine that, the monarchy, not the Prime Minister, reassuring the markets. For many Britons, that was the moment they realised who was really in charge. And yet one mystery continued haunting the public. What was the king's real position in all this? Officially, he had said nothing, not a single word. But according to palace insiders, King Charles had been quietly making calls throughout the night. To Commonwealth leaders, to military heads, and two key figures within Parliament, every call, every whisper pointed toward one chilling conclusion. He was preparing for something monumental, something that hadn't happened in generations. Because if the monarchy believed the government had lost its legitimacy, if they believed the moral authority of the crown outweighed the authority of parliament, then Britain was heading into uncharted waters. The kind of territory where constitutions bend and history rewrites itself. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, one question began echoing through every newsroom, every living room, every palace corridor in Britain. Was this just a royal scandal or the first step toward a royal reckoning? By the next morning, the situation had spiralled far beyond political theatre and it had become a full-blown constitutional nightmare. Downing Street was in lockdown mode. Press officers scrambling to control the narrative while senior advisors whispered the unthinkable. The monarchy had effectively taken control of the national conversation and Keir Starmer was powerless to stop it. British television was flooded with one image: Prince William shaking hands with veterans at a London shelter. The same veterans who had been ignored by the government's policies. That single image shattered whatever remained of Starmer's credibility. The man who promised compassion looked cold and detached, while the future king appeared human, emotional, and unmistakably patriotic. Inside the Labour Party, the implosion was complete. Cabinet members were no longer whispering in private. They were openly demanding a leadership challenge. The resignation letters came in, one after another, each word a dagger to the Prime Minister's authority. "I cannot stand by while the government loses sight of British values," wrote one minister in a now viral statement. Polls released by midday showed Labour's approval ratings collapsing to their lowest level since the early 1980s, with Reform UK and the Conservatives both surging ahead. Starmer's government was no longer just unpopular, it was toxic. Behind closed doors, his allies begged him to issue an apology to the royal family, but he refused, pacing furiously through number 10 as aides avoided eye contact. One insider later described the atmosphere as a funeral without the coffin. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace was moving with calculated silence. Officially, no statements were issued, no press briefings scheduled, but off the record, the palace machine was working overtime. Calls were made to senior editors, diplomatic channels were engaged, and a message was subtly delivered to the public: the crown stands above the chaos. What made the moment so extraordinary was not what the royals said, but what they didn't. Their restraint became their power. As the government shouted, the monarchy simply stood still, radiating calm authority. The contrast could not have been more brutal. Then came the breaking news that sent shockwaves across the nation. Leaked documents from inside Downing Street revealed that the Prime Minister had been warned in advance that Prince William planned to address veteran homelessness. He wasn't blindsided, he was forewarned. The memo showed that Starmer's advisors explicitly told him to remain silent and avoid confrontation. He ignored every word. The revelation turned the narrative from political miscalculation to personal arrogance. Even his most loyal supporters could no longer defend him. "He knew," screamed one tabloid headline. "He knew and still attacked the prince." Overnight, Starmer's image as a rational leader evaporated. What remained was a portrait of pride and self-destruction. The fallout was immediate. The pound fell again, investment confidence wavered, and European leaders privately expressed concern about Britain's stability. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage capitalised on the implosion like a seasoned predator. At a rally in Birmingham, he declared to thunderous applause, "When our future king defends veterans, he defends Britain. When Starmer attacks him, he attacks you." It was populism wrapped in patriotism, and it worked. Reform UK's polling numbers spiked overnight, pushing them into a statistical tie with Labour. The once unthinkable was now on the horizon, a three-way political crisis that could collapse Parliament itself. But perhaps the most haunting development came from within Buckingham Palace. Multiple insider leaks suggested that King Charles had summoned his top constitutional advisors for what was described as a rare emergency consultation. The topic, according to one source, was unprecedented. The possibility of dissolving Parliament if the government was deemed to have lost the confidence of the people. Such a move hadn't been seriously discussed in over a century, and yet the whispers grew louder. Oh, could the monarch, in defence of national unity, actually intervene? Would he dare? As the nation watched with bated breath, one final twist unfolded. Late that evening, BBC journalists reported that Prince William had recorded a follow-up message to be released at the appropriate time. Nobody knew its content, but palace insiders hinted it was meant to bring clarity to the moment. The government braced for impact. Ministers cancelled weekend plans. The opposition readied statements. Social media exploded with speculation. Would William go further? Would he name names? Or would he simply remind the people what the crown truly represents? Duty, honour and service above politics. As midnight struck, Britain stood on the edge of history. The monarchy had reawakened its dormant power. The government teetered on the brink of collapse, and the people, exhausted, angry and uncertain, turned their eyes to the palace for answers. Was this the end of Keir Starmer's premiership, or the rebirth of royal authority in modern Britain? And when Prince William's next words finally echo across the nation, will they heal Britain's divisions, or ignite a revolution no one can control?